Hey there, you're either watching or listening to The Climb, and my name is John Sarakis. The Climb is brought to you by the Digital Mastermind. The Digital Mastermind is a group of technologists, agency owners, and marketers that get together and solve all of our industry's problems as a collective, individually as well. So if you would like to join, go ahead and shoot me an email, John, Jon, at digitalmastermind.com. And we have our event. There are still some tickets left. So if you get a chance, go ahead and go to digitalmastermind.com. It's the best thing of the year for anybody that's in the agency business. So if you miss out on this, shame on you. Now, today's monologue. I'd like to talk about the old school. So sales for some people and having some conversations are beginning to get a little bit tough. The channels that they're using, whether it be social media or email or whatnot, doesn't appear to be working. But some people still have that frightening fear of actually going up to another person at a networking event and asking for the sale, or actually just picking up the phone and trying to make a cold call. And in those cases, that phone could weigh 15,000 pounds, and they're going to do whatever they can to not do that. And just what I call that is productive procrastination. But if you actually dig in and figure out how bad you want something, you can make things move. You can get that fear out of the way, and you can stop analyzing the way that you feel. And the old tactics will always work because those are the fundamental things in connecting to people. So if you or anybody on your team is struggling with any of those things, ask them, what are the old school tactics that you're using? And that's a lot of what we talked about with our guest, Walter Crosby. But before we get into all that, Dave, why don't you come out here?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Blue's a good color on you.
Thank you.
So old school, right? I think a lot of people just get hung up on social selling, and those things do work. It's a methodology. It's things that you have to adopt. But what are some of the things that you see where people can do something that is tried and true that they're not doing?
Well, I instantly think about high-end ticket items, right? You know, a social media campaign is not going to convince you to drop $150,000 on a boat. You know, you're going to go press the flesh, talk to the guy, find out about it. You're going to ride. You're going to sit in the boat. You know, same with expensive cars. Like, if you're selling something that's under $100, then you need to play a numbers game, and that's what social media is great at, the numbers game. Or online marketing. It's a numbers game. It's the more views, and you're just hoping to get 5% of that. But when you're talking about high dollar ticket items, then you've got to have old school sales, ready to go.
Yeah, and I think that the best approach is having as many lines in the water as you can have.
Sure.
Right. So I think when people use these things as a crutch, where nobody's answering our emails anymore, it's Have you had a phone call? I know in some industries, fax blasts work, and I'm not. And some people look at you like you're crazy, and we're not doing Morse code here, right? It's a communication that's going to get into somebody's office where they can have the conversation. I think you got to do whatever it takes, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing the fundamentals to strike, then you're doing yourself a disservice.
I'm reminded of, I think it was like episode 3. We're talking, or 7 actually. We're talking to Jeff from 352, and he was just talking about his focus on sending people to networking events and shaking hands. He goes, we're not going to get big projects by sending out an email blast. If you want big projects, you got to go find these people and find them in their environment.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
And yeah, he took away from his SEO campaign. He realized those leads weren't the leads that they wanted, and I think a lot of people get hung up on that. Like, hey, this is what's walking in the door. When you have the ability, especially as a service-based business, you can go wherever you want. You're not a 7-Eleven. This isn't your drive-by traffic. The location is irrelevant. It's all about the person that's willing to do what it takes to get the business in the door.
Yeah, and I think after that episode, I was like, all right, hey, go book some conferences. Like, go find some places to go, because this is obviously what we want to do.
And I think the other thing too is it's having a collection of people, right? Where you have an event that's super niche focused or super focused on a title where you can bring those people in. And speaking of Jeff and what they do, that's a fantastic thing that they do.
They're creating their own audience.
Yeah,
it's perfect. That's old school 101 right there. So create your audience and create. All it is the greatest bait in the industry, right? And you bring them in and you bring them to your hunting grounds, and then you go hunt. you go feast.
Create a magnetic approach. I
Yeah.
agree. But, and I say this all the time, when your back's up against the wall and you have to drive sales in, people just, you got to pick up the phone, email, do whatever it is that you got to do, but just don't rest on one of them. I mean, just hit it from multiple different angles. And I think people just get so hung up on this one thing that may have worked. And we want more clients that look exactly like this one. And that one was a referral. Hey, if things are going to get tough, I mean, things are going to change in certain markets. People have to get real active in doing what it takes.
If you're selling something quality and you're really good at delivering it, you can build an entire company based on referrals. I mean, that's a way of a start. You're only going to get so far. But I mean, when you build a reputation, that's like the most powerful form of marketing right there.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And it makes everything easier. You have the sales stories, you have that build trust. You have other people saying, hey, have you worked with these guys? What's that like? Oh, it was fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah. And those are all building blocks. The thing that is the toughest is just getting that interaction and then having somebody like and trust you immediately so they can see the value in what you have and just get past those mental obstacles.
And systematize it into your processes. We have the clutch review as that's in our processes. When we're done with the project, I need a clutch review from that customer.
And it is part of the sales process where it's just, hey, look at our reviews. These are all third-party reviews. And if they think that we're well, we'll put you in. If you want to contact any of them, we'll go ahead and put you in touch with them.
Yep. That works great.
Bingo, bango. And speaking of working great, go ahead and check out this episode with Walter Crosby, definite sales pro of pros. And we actually have a theme. We're going to have other sales pros on here because we see that's something that's necessary in agencies. He also has a fantastic podcast, Sales and Cigars. So please check this out. Like, share, comment. Let me know what you think of it. Thank you so much. Bye now. Hey, Walter, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity, John. Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to start with your climb. Tell me, how did you get here?
How did I get here? How far you want me to go back? Sales beginning?
Wherever you can do it. Just make it as entertaining as possible.
I'm like the traditional sales guy. I graduated from, and I don't know why I remember this. I graduated from University of Michigan, and 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at the Vanderbilt Club in New York City, and a friend's father is saying, "So what do you want to do with the rest of your life?" And I got no idea. I was hoping you were going to tell me. So he's like, "All right, sales, right?" Because I think that's the thing. Because what's the bar to get into sales? It's like you're breathing and you're willing to take on a set of responsibilities. So that's how I got into sales. And I'm just somebody who takes it as a challenge, that when I don't know how to do something, I'm gonna work really hard at getting better at it. And it's been over 30 years, and I think I've gotten better at it. But my first job was in New York City, commercial real estate in '87. When you remember, you're probably not old enough, but Black Monday in October, where the market just took a dump. And
30 years ago would have been not. Was that the savings and trust deal? Yeah.
And then there was a little real estate involved, and it just went down. Well, that was my second day. So, and I had some really good training. The
in
guy
day one,
hired me,
or just in general? In day one, you had some really good training? Or?
Yeah, it was. There's a desk. Go grab that chair. We'll get you a phone this afternoon. Go canvas 805 3rd Avenue. And I'll see you at 6. That was my training. And I had to ask somebody else, like, what does it mean, canvas 805 3rd Avenue, right? I know where it is, but what does that mean? And what it meant was to go to the top of the building and knock on every door and figure out, identify the company, and then find out who made the leasing decisions for that company. So I was welcomed with open arms just about everywhere I went, every day, when you go canvas a building. And then the next day you would call all those people from the reverse directory. Remember, this was before email, and this was before, Google. So you call, and then you go back out and canvas another building, and you were just building a database of things. And, 16 months later, you're close a deal worth $250,000.
Wow.
But you starve for that period of time.
Yeah.
So that,
And how did you get from that period to where you are now?
I made some money, did not like, I knew that I loved the city, but I didn't want to raise a family there. So I knew I had to do something different. So I took like 9 months and went to Atlanta to kind of figure out my next move, which brought me back to Michigan. And I started a business with a friend who was really, really talented, but incredibly lazy and didn't know anything about business. So he was doing about $16,000 a year in revenue.
Jeez.
And 6 months later, we turned it into 720,000. I raised his prices a smidge, and I made him work. Bought him out a little bit later, converted that business, sold that business. I had a series of sales jobs and sales management jobs where I, like the traditional sales manager, you get promoted because you're a good salesperson to sales manager because they assume you know what you're doing. I had no idea, but that's what they did. So I had to figure that out. And then probably 7 years ago, I had quit a job that paid me a lot of money that I absolutely hated. I went and worked for a startup that could never get up off the ground because they couldn't produce a product. So I went back to thinking about, looking for another job. I figured I realized I was going to have to work for an asshole. And I figured that might as well be me. So I started this little fractional sales management practice, and it's morphed into Helix sales development. We provide, our focus is working with companies that want to go from 7 million to 15 million and getting the sales managers the help that they need. Because they're just left out there swinging in the wind. And we were trying to fix that.
So based on when you were canvassing 805 and doing the reverse directory, what do you see is lost on the salespeople today that didn't have that experience?
Well, I don't want to sound like the old guy but when I hear a salesperson tell me that they can't make 25 phone calls a day, I just laugh. Because at that time I was making about 400 dials a day, maybe talking to 5 people, and 3 of them hung up on me. So to me, there's a reliance on technology. And I think the technology that works really well right now is that little app on your mobile device called the telephone. If people embrace that a little bit, because when we call people, they're like, how you doing? Like nobody calls them anymore. They send them emails, text messages. So I think that's something that's really missed. But the biggest thing to me is salespeople are trying to sell their product and service instead of trying to help their customers. They don't even try to understand the customer. They don't understand their problems. So they don't ask the right questions to be able to figure out if they have a solution. And it's not entirely the salespeople's fault, because the company hasn't helped them see that that's what's important. So that's what we're going about trying to change, is giving the sales managers a fighting chance and helping salespeople realize that, if you just have a conversation with people instead of trying to pitch them, that whole pitch and chase model just doesn't work. And it's a great profession, even though it has a low bar to get in. If you approach it as a professional, sky's the limit.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're a proponent for cold calling. And I used to have to cold call
It's
lot.
A component. It's part of it.
Yeah. I'm not saying this is like the cold call university. I mean, feel free to steal that idea. But with that, like how deep do you guys get into the psychology when you're talking about it? Because there's some people, they will do anything but pick up that phone and call.
Well, I mean, call reluctance is a big problem, and some people you can't get past it. We look at things like sales DNA, and we think there's 6 components of the stuff that's swirling around in a salesperson's head, right? Because as a kid, you were told, don't talk to strangers. Really, you should just be quiet, not talk to somebody unless they ask you a question. God forbid you talk about money, right? And you should be doing some homework and looking at things before you go buy something. And as a salesperson, all of those thoughts, all of that socialization and environmental things that we were taught as children get in the way of doing a good job. And one of them is being a need for approval as a salesperson. And this sounds kind of odd the first time you hear it, but salespeople need to be likable. But as a salesperson, I don't need my prospects and my customers to like me and to want to be friends, right? I need them to trust me. I need to be likable enough that we can develop a rapport and start a conversation. We'll eventually get there maybe, but if they need that person to like them, they're going to struggle to be skeptical with what they say. They're going to struggle with pushing back a little bit on their ideas, and they're going to struggle asking the right questions to really dig in. So I think there's a element of the commitment and their desire to do the job and to get better at it. All the things floating around in their head, some people call it head trash. The skills are the easiest thing to address. It's just getting them out of their own way. And some of them don't want to, and they can't, so they won't.
It sounds like that's a pretty finite number, right? Because not everybody's likable, right? And then you have to also have the muscle because everybody wants to feel connected and not be rejected at some point. But I think it's all
we're humans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you're out there looking for like psychopaths and sociopaths that.
No, that's not helpful.
Yeah, it's got to be somebody that can show compassion. So
empathy is most important there, right? You have to really empathize around what that person's problem is. I always equate it to like your buddy calls you up and says, hey, I got a problem. I need to talk. Can we go have a beer? Right? And you should approach your sales conversations in the same manner. What are you going to do? You're going to listen. You're going to empathize that, there's a problem there. It's your friend. You might laugh at them because they're worried about something silly, but at the beginning, you're really trying to understand what their problem is. And that's how we have to approach sales. So as a salesperson, it's my job to be the person that they need me to be, that prospect. So a lot of times I'm acting, and I use a quote from David Sandler that says, sales is a Broadway show performed by a psychiatrist. So in other words, you're acting, but you're always paying attention to what's going on. You're listening really, really well. You're actively listening to what's being said. And then you have a conversation. There's no script. It's about listening and empathy, skepticism, curiosity, and having a conversation.
It's interesting you use the word empathy because I can't remember when I learned this, but there's a distinction between empathy and compassion, right? So empathy takes from you. So that's like if you're the salesperson, you're giving too much in a deal because you feel bad. Now, if you're compassionate, you're hearing what they're saying, but you're still holding to your values.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. You have to hold your ground,
right?
You have to hold your margins and all of those things, and sometimes you have to say, you know what, John, I'm not a good fit. What I offer isn't a good fit. So you can still be a resource to them. You can still help them see that there's other things that they need, and maybe they need to talk to somebody that does this over here. And that's harder to get to. But 7% of all salespeople on the planet are what we call elite. right? And then there's another 13, 14% that are good. And then there's a chunk that are serviceable, and 51, 52% you don't want anywhere near your team.
What are the characteristics of the elite?
They can reach decision makers, build rapport, and have a conversation. But I think first and foremost, they're committed to being a professional. They're committed to doing whatever it takes ethically to win business. And they have a desire to be there and to perform. They're good at responsibility. In other words, they don't make excuses. And a lot of times they're motivated. They know how they're motivated, and they're motivated in a way that's going to drive their self-performance. They need help from time to time. They need coaching just like anybody else, but their desire and their commitment is going to keep them driving to figure out a way to make something work.
How do you find them?
It's hard. It's really hard. And if your goal is to find that A+ player, you need to be patient. We have tools that allow us to kind of do an MRI to all of those 21 core competencies, but you can do pretty well with people that are close to that elite, the good salespeople, because they're coachable. And if you got somebody that's coachable, that has their head on straight, the rest of it you can really work with. But if I find myself saying to somebody that I'm working with, I can't care about your success more than you, and that's what this feels like, that's a sure sign that somebody has to either move on or really decide to make some changes.
When you care about their success more than they do, that's somebody that you should move on.
That's a signal for me.
Yeah.
That there's trouble. I mean, I can usually identify it, but I look at it, if I'm working with somebody and they're employed at this company, when I start working, I have to give them, in my mind, 90 days to really determine if they're going to step up or if they're going to step out. And they make the decision, not me. And it's by their actions. And we try to figure out what their goals are, what their why is, and we help them to get this why, a new house, a new car, a boat, whatever that is. It's got to be something big that takes time and resources, but that's what motivates them. So then we tie that to what they need to do every day, every week to hit their revenue numbers. And then we use that to create positive accountability. It's not rocket science, because I can do it. If it was rocket science, I'd have trouble.
But it's sales science, and you're not going to see most physicists be able to close deals. Trust me, I've met them.
That's true. They struggle with too much thinking and trying to be logical, and engineers have some of the same trouble.
They just hit you with a bunch of word salad, and word salad sounds like shit. It also tastes like shit. It doesn't close deals. So
100%.
You guys like you. All right. So what about? All right. So you've had a storied career. You got Helix now. Like, what is the biggest challenge that you've overcome that you think our audience would benefit from hearing?
That's a good question, and I think it's a daily. For me, it's a daily thing that I need to find that leverage and get better every day. I did. A friend of mine took me through the rocking chair test. You ever heard of that?
I haven't.
You're in your late 90s. You don't have a lot of time left, and you're sitting on your porch in a rocking chair. You're gazing out over your property or your yard. Excuse me. And you look back, and how satisfied are you? And there's some questions that you ask yourself, but at that point, are you happy with what you accomplished? And for me, I want to provide value for people. So the challenge is for me to constantly get better, and it's never being satisfied and having that discipline to do that. Just like working out or watching what you eat, whatever those challenges are, you need that discipline and focus, but you need you need that reason to leverage to get out of bed in the morning to go do it. And whatever that has to be, it's got to be real. It's got to be meaningful. So for me, it's that challenge, and it's hard for me because I prefer to not to talk to people all that much. Frankly, I know that sounds terrible, but I'm perfectly happy sitting with a friend or by myself and having a cigar and reading a book. But I enjoy watching people excel. I enjoy watching them do something that they didn't think they could do that I knew they could do. So that's the driver. But I've been told through my whole life that you don't apply to the University of Michigan. You won't get in. You're not going to be successful in New York. You can't do that. You can't start a business. And that's, somebody tells me I can't do something, it's usually the reason I do it.
Yeah. Now, what do they know? Right.
Yeah. They usually don't have any idea. And it's just an opinion.
So you said, so how do you create the disciplines, right? Is it just like, do you track them? Is it muscle? I mean, because it sounds like that's the ongoing biggest challenge that you've had. So how do you overcome those?
It's finding that leverage point for myself. So with business, I have lots of competition for people that do what I do. So I need to be sharp, and I have mentors, I have coaches, I go to training, every once a quarter, we're doing something to sharpen the saw. And the motivation is to be better than I was the day before, and to be better than, you always pick out a couple of people that you want to make sure you're scoring better than they do. I'm a competitive guy. So, whether I wasn't a tremendous athlete, but I played football and tennis, and it sort of builds that team spirit and that competitive nature. I hate losing.
So this is something I always look at, and I love asking, high performers, salespeople. Is it that you like winning so much, or is it that you hate losing so much?
Hate losing, without a doubt.
Amen. I'm the same way. Absolutely.
And I think that is the right answer. I think there is a right answer there. And I think we're on the same team there.
Yeah. And I've had other people break it down like, oh no, I love winning because it's going towards something. And I was like, that's all positive, but most of human nature is avoiding pain. Let's be real. So
you will do more to avoid pain as a human being than you will to gain pleasure. I know there's moments and different points in our life that we'll do, but as a general rule, we will do a whole lot more to not have something be painful.
Absolutely. So what would you say is the best piece of sales advice that you could give to anybody? Could be a business owner, could be somebody that's in sales. Like, what is something that is absolutely just rock solid?
I think there's two things, especially if they're younger. Go get training from a reputable source. Doesn't matter, right, what it is. There's a lot of great sources of training, but you got to have some way to know if you're being successful or not. And it'll take you 3 times as long if you try to figure it out for yourself. And I think the other thing is to stop thinking of it as selling and start thinking of it as a conversation to see if you can help somebody. Because that buyer, and more these days, it's becoming more and more prevalent. And in a few months, it's going to become even more important. If you can't help them and they don't feel like you're a resource, they don't need you. They don't need us for information. Back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you needed to go to the car dealership to figure out what the car offered you, what its features were. What you couldn't get that information. You had to go to the dealership, look at the thing, look under the hood. And now you don't need that for very much. And so if you're a transactional salesperson, you're not needed. So you really need to learn to be able to create value and be a resource. And what they don't understand is that they are the resource. It's not the product of the company. It's them asking really good questions to help that buyer determine if they're doing the right thing, helping them figure it out, and challenging them sometimes. Skepticism a little bit.
Yeah, I think being skeptical is really important. I think that's really sage advice. And yeah, you reminded me. That's how. And I think somebody much smarter than me said this at one point. They said, "All sales is a series of conversations. That's all it is. Just a series of conversations. That conversation is going to lead to to a close, or it's going to lead to you parting ways. But either way, that's all it is. And if you look at it more than that, then you're going to complicate it.
There's usually an intent, and you're trying to get to a decision, and that decision might be that we're done. It might be that this isn't a good fit, and we move on. And that doing the right thing pays off. Stop sounding like a freaking salesperson. That's just a awful experience.
Agreed. Yeah, nobody likes that. All right. Is there anything we haven't covered today that the world should know?
That the recession that everybody's not talking about and everybody's kind of like pretending isn't there, I think is 2 or 3 months away, because the signs of I was talking to a friend of mine who's pretty negative. It's like the signs of the apocalypse are occurring.
Clouds have formed.
But the large companies are missing their earning forecast, consistently. So what they're going to do is what they always do: cut and try to slash their way to profitability. That never works. And then they're just going to keep down that spiral. So if you're a salesperson that isn't providing value to your customers and helping them see that you're a resource and you can provide ROI, you're going to be one of the first people that they go. So it starts with the large companies and it goes to mid-market, and then it just works its way down to the small companies. So now is the time to be try to get the better, whether you're a CEO or a sales leader. Now's the time to start working on helping your team, doing all the things that you should have done the last decade, because they've been just taking orders lately. The pent-up demand from the shutdown and the supply chain problems, people are just happy to get something, right? If it's close to what they want. And that's all going to go away. And if you can't create value, you're going to be on the outside looking in. So the good news is that's going to open up some salespeople that have competencies. So if people that are looking for salespeople and are willing to bring those people on to help them add new business, that's an opportunity.
So what I'm hearing is people should get aggressive and invest in their team, make sure that they are trained properly, and they should make sure that they're getting aggressive in their sales and marketing activities.
Marketing, you can't shut that off, right? This is the companies that traditionally, go back and look at the research. When they shut down their research, shut down their marketing and advertising, they're the ones that go away, and the ones that kept it going are the ones that gain market share. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, but there are things that they can do themselves that will help give their sales managers permission to help their salespeople and to coach. Stop wasting time sending silly reports. Let's focus on things that matter. Coach people, right? I mean, there's lots of little things that they can do that will help, but they need to start doing that and take their head out of the sand.
Got it. Love the advice. Awesome. All right, now I want to give this space to you. Plug whatever it is that you want to plug, my friend.
We're here as a resource, and our little niche is that CEO or entrepreneur who wants to go from 7 million to 15 million and have the infrastructure so they can get to 30, right? And they're not going to do it in a day or a week, right? But you can get from 7 to 15 in 3 years if you're in the right space and you start working on the right things. And we don't start with training, right? We start with trying to understand. So like if you go to the doctor and you say you got a problem with your knee, they don't say, all right, jump up on the table, we're going to start cutting and figure out what's going on. They run a couple of tests and they do some analysis, they question you, and then they come back and tell you it's not your knee, man, it's your hip. And your hip's the problem. So let's fix your hip, and then your knee will automatically take care of itself. There's a lot of that where they look at the symptoms and try to treat the symptom, and they don't really understand the core problem. And that's where we start, and then we go where we need to go, is understanding that problem. And there's a lot of people that do that, but whether it's with Helix or with somebody else, start working on those things.
Would you work with a company that does less than $7 million?
It's a bigger challenge. They'd have to really convince me they're committed and have the desire to get there. You know, we have people that are, you know, around $5 million but they're really committed.
Yeah.
And I have I'm not everybody's cup of tea, because I kind of shoot straight. And one of the things that we do is we get somebody to a point, like sitting across the table from the CEO, and they're like excited, this is going to be great, let's go. And I'm like, well, hold on a second here. Let me tell you why this isn't going to work. And they, like, you know, look at me. They don't laugh. They look at me like, what's he going to say? And I'm like, it's you. You're the reason this won't work. And let me tell you why. And then I help them understand that somebody in 45 days is going to come to you and say, this guy is awful. He's making me do things I don't want to do. We've never had to do this. He doesn't understand the business. He's mean, whatever they want to. And what you do in that moment is going to make or break what the success of this. So commitment and desire to travel a bumpy path. If that's not there, I try to flush that out. Mm-hmm. I do a pretty good job, but sometimes people get past me. But we don't work with everybody because I don't think we're a fit for everybody. If somebody's a $200 million SaaS company, it's not my thing. And there's a lot of people that would think that's silly to have that mindset, but I want to create value, and I want to help people. And I don't think I have the infrastructure or the expertise in that space. Just me.
Good for you. You know what you're good at. I love it. All right, Walter. I appreciate you coming on today.
It was fun. I enjoyed the conversation, and I like the format. So it's cool. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Hope you enjoyed our episode. Please subscribe and review wherever you can. And if you would like to join the Digital Mastermind, go ahead and shoot me an email at jon@digitalmastermind.com or visit us at digitalmastermind.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye now.